I'm Kikkan Randall. I grew up in Anchorage, Alaska. I was a 5-time Olympian in cross-country skiing and world champion. I'm an active mom, and I'm a cancer survivor. I was born in Salt Lake City, and the day after my first birthday, my dad had been working at a rental shop, and he brought home the smallest boots and skis he could find and built a small hill for me in the front yard. And I don't think I was quite walking yet. The boots kind of propped me up, but I took my first runs right there at 1 year old. And I don't have a lot of memories of that early on, but I think the comfort of being on snow and that sensation of gliding has really been centered in my life since those early days.
I put Kikkan on skis the day after her first birthday, and I think being a lifelong skier, I looked forward to my kids skiing, and Kikkan was our first child, and so I was anxious to give her the experience of skiing early and also possibly learning some balance and motion.
Then when I was 3 years old, we moved to Alaska, and my mom's side of the family was really into cross-country skiing. So around the age of 6, I got into the Anchorage Junior Nordic program, and a couple of my aunts were the coaches, so I got in and I kind of chased them around, and I have to admit I didn't fall in love with cross-country at first. So growing up in the Randall family, I was the oldest of 3 kids. My brother Tanner is 4 years younger, and my sister Callie is 7 years younger. And 3 of us have kind of each taken our own path. I definitely gravitated towards the athlete piece. My brother is an incredible artist. He got into fashion design. And then my younger sister is into theater, and she has an amazing presence on stage, and she's a director. So while we each took these different paths, we really had an awesome upbringing together. Growing up in Alaska is a unique experience. I mean, we have a huge outdoor playground, and you have snow on the ground 6 months of the year. So it's really advantageous to get outside and enjoy all the activities you can do to take advantage of the amazing landscape. I think the isolation far away from the rest of the United States, the weather patterns, really makes the people kind of bond together. So the community was absolutely essential, and I was fortunate to also have a big family. So I grew up doing a lot of things on weekends with aunts and uncles and cousins and my grandparents and my siblings and my parents. And my whole childhood felt like this big adventure. We were in the mountains, we were on the water, whether it was summer, fall, winter, spring. We were always outside doing something. And I think playing around in all these different landscapes and conditions really developed a lot of my personality and my spirit and what I thought about kind of aiming to as I grew up and created those dreams. So I was really into alpine skiing for 6th, 7th, and 8th grade. A huge role model of mine was Peekaboo Street. I actually named my unicycle Peekaboo, and really was writing down that I wanted to win an Olympic medal in alpine skiing. As I got into alpine racing in 6th grade, that's when my Olympic ambitions really took shape. Went from being this kind of lofty childhood dream to, I really want to win an Olympic medal in alpine skiing. And I threw everything I had into that season, and I ended up as the alternate for the Arctic Winter Games team. And I remember kind of crying in the car on the way home, and my dad coaching me through how to take some lessons from that and put it into motivation for next year. So I came back strong, put everything in, and ended up as the alternate for the junior national team that next season. And then as I got into high school, I was doing cross-country running and track in the summer, and all my running friends were doing cross-country skiing in the winter. And so I found myself at this point where I kind of had to choose, and because I like the people involved in cross-country so much, I gravitated that way for a couple of years.
I first met Kikkan when she was probably 14 years old. She'd just come into Betty Davis East Anchorage High School, and she was coming into the cross-country running team and the track team, and I was an assistant coach. And we all knew her already. She was a phenom as a younger child, but then when I first actually met her, it was just so clear that she was so driven, and her expressed goal was to go to the Olympics. And there was just no doubt in any of our minds that she wasn't going to make that goal. It was really, really clear that she had not only the physical ability, but the drive to do it.
There was a time when she was, when we first put her into cross-country skiing in the junior Nordic program here in town. She was doing several other sports at the same time, but she also took on cross-country skiing, and she did it for a couple seasons, and we were about to sign her up for another fall session. There's usually a fall and a spring session, and she said she didn't want to do it. And it totally floored us because we thought she liked it, and we told her that. She said, "No, I've never liked it." So we let her take that session off, didn't think of it. Well, weren't sure she was going to go back to it, but by the spring she did want to do it again.
It wasn't until the age of 16 that I suddenly realized cross-country skiing to me was this cool combination of all those things I'd been doing growing up. It had the speed of downhill, it had that kind of pure effort of running, it had a bit of a team aspect like soccer. And I was also really intrigued by the fact that the 2002 Olympics were only 3 years away at that point. The year after I graduated from high school, I put all my eggs in the basket to try to make the Olympic team, and I went over and raced at World Juniors, and the races there didn't go super well, but at the end of the championships I got a phone call that I had made the 2002 Olympic team, and that for me was a dream come true that I'd been thinking about since I was 5 years old.
Growing up as a Haynes, Randall, but from the Haynes family, which is a household name here in Anchorage for sports especially, we were kind of raised to just strive after our dreams, go for the biggest thing you can, because obviously we have the entire family behind you and you choose, it's your destiny. We're not going to get it for you, but we're going to support you along the way. And that was demonstrated fully with Kikkan. She was, told herself when she was 13 or 14, I'm going to go to the Olympics. And how many kids say that? But then in 2002, in December or January, we got that call that she had made it. She had achieved her goal.
And so I left Europe and I went straight to the Olympics in Salt Lake and joined the team and got all the Team USA gear, got to march into the opening ceremonies, which was an absolutely overwhelming experience, and then came out to the competition venue. And I remember out there training the day before the race, I would be following these people around whose posters I still had on my wall. And I knew I was at those games to gain experience, but still couldn't help to go out and want to feel like you were competitive. So I raced my heart out, and the best I did was 44th place in the sprint. But I remember standing in the crowd as they had the flower ceremony that day, and I watched the winners go up on the podium, and I looked at the banner beside me that said, "Light the fire within," and I decided I wanted to try to go after one of those medals someday. So coming off those 2002 Olympics, I wanted to figure out how I was going to possibly win an Olympic medal someday. So I sat down with my coach and we mapped out all the benchmarks and progressions I was going to need to make. And it turns out it was going to take 10 years at a reasonable pace. So I started working on this roadmap and ticking off one season at a time. First couple of years went pretty well, but then in 2005, I hit a roadblock. I was over in Europe feeling homesick. I finished dead last at the World Championships. our women's relay was actually pulled out of the race because we were going to be lapped by Norway. And at the end of that season, I remember feeling pretty hopeless. Like, there's no way I'm ever going to win an Olympic medal someday. And all the kids I graduated from high school with are getting their degrees. What am I doing? But I still felt compelled to try one more season. The 2006 Olympics was 1 year away. I wanted to go through one more time, give myself a benchmark, and then make the decision.
I started working with Kikkan in 2006. While she was kind of building her way into the World Cup, she had already had some success in the Olympics and World Cup circuit. In 2006, I became the head coach and the director. At that point, I remember sitting down with Kikkan and saying, "Okay, what are your goals, and how far do you want to go with this?"
Going into the 2006 Olympics, I had set my mark at a top 20 finish. Going into the sprint event, which was my best, I remember feeling very nervous. My competition all looked incredibly strong. It had been kind of a stressful Olympics up to that point. But I decided I was going to go out and ski as hard as I possibly could, and that would tell me where I stood. And I ended up surprising myself and finishing 9th place on the day. An absolute breakthrough to be top 10 at the Olympics, and the proof I needed that my ultimate goal of being on that Olympic podium someday was in fact possible. And that was a big game changer. Coming off those 2006 Olympics, my career really started to hit its stride. In December of 2007, I won my first World Cup, and the first time a US woman had ever done so. But then 4 months later, I ended up experiencing a massive blood clot in my leg. And in an instant, not only was unsure of whether or not I could chase my goals in skiing, but was suddenly unsure if I would continue to be active as a person, which was central and core to who I am. And so the only way to react to that kind of experience was for me to set a new ambitious goal. So I told my coach I wanted to win a world championship medal. And he told me later that seemed a little ambitious where I was coming from off the injury. But I ended up working hard and coming into those championships and winning a silver medal. It's the first time an American woman had ever won a world championship medal. And that gave me so much confidence that I was on track for that Olympic goal. Coming into the 2010 Olympics, I had all the confidence that I was on track to my ultimate Olympic goal. But I also knew I was going to have to wait an additional 4 years. Vancouver for me was really about experience because I wouldn't get a shot at the individual skate sprint, my specialty, because the sprint would be contested in Classic. So I had a solid games, got that great experience, and really looked forward to the next 4 years. The 10-year plan to win an Olympic medal that I'd set off my first Olympic Games really started to come into play at the 2014 Olympics. I was coming in as a 2-time overall sprint champion. I had won on the Olympic course the year before, and I truly was a gold medal favorite for those 2014 Games. And it was such a cool feeling because it was everything I had ever dreamed of building up. I had the confidence, and I also got the attention for the sport of cross-country skiing. We'd also been building an incredible women's team up to that point, and I came into the 2014 Olympics as the leader of that team, ready to finally win that first ever U.S. women's Olympic medal in cross-country. So there I was on the day of the 2014 freestyle sprint, knowing this was my one shot, coming into it with so much confidence. In the quarterfinals, I had a challenging heat. I was leading the race coming off the final turn, but when I crossed the line, I was in a photo finish, and I lost by 0.05 of a second. And that was the difference between going on to fight for the medals and being eliminated for the day. And that was my shot.
And it was, it was this really bittersweet day, because I think it was absolutely heartbreaking to see Kikkan not make the final, but I was also, of course, excited that I was in the final. And I remember, she had to deal with the disappointment and then walk through the media zone and try to explain to every reporter why she hadn't won the gold medal that day. And I was just warming up on the spin bike, and I remember her coming over to me, taking the time to, even though I'm sure she was consumed with disappointment, she took the time out of her day and her interviews to come over and give me some tips for the final and tell me how proud she was of me, and that she wanted me to go out there and ski hard and see what I could do. And so I think, I had known Kikkan I'd been on the team with her for several years before that, but I think, that was the perfect example of the kind of person she is. And she cares so much about her teammates, and she was a great leader. I think she always made us feel like we were part of her success rather than setting herself apart. She made us feel like if she could be successful, we could be successful too, because we had a part in her success.
She was the reason that the team is how it is now. I think it functions as this very well-oiled, natural, organic, just cohesive unit of people, from the athletes, coaches, wax techs, and I think without Kikkan that never would have happened. I think it started in the mid-2000s, late 2000s, when she started having a lot of success on the World Cup and winning races, and then not just like she never really celebrated just those individual successes. She always she was like the first person to talk about what the team behind her was doing for her to get there, and I think that's really started making people believe in kind of this bigger idea of like the collective team and what we were able to do as a bigger group of people. So yeah, she was incredibly important, and the reason why the team now is kind of known as this one big, really successful, fun family of people.
Coming off the Sochi Olympics, I was really excited to start a family. So my husband and I got strategic, and I ended up taking a season off in the 2016. I continued training while I was pregnant, and then in the spring of 2016, my son Breck was born, and I got back to training.
When Kikkan came to me and shared that she was going to start a family, I had kind of two responses. One was, okay, that's fantastic. And the other was, okay, how's this going to work with your skiing? There is a good question about, how does an athlete, kind of balance those? How does one of the best sprint athletes in the world, when she could dedicate all of her time to training, now a mom, how can she keep up the training, the preparation to stay at the top in the world?
It was like another mission for her, right? And I just have this vision in my head of her being super pregnant and having, she was doing pull-ups And this was in the newspaper, by the way. And she had this weight plate around her waist. And she was super pregnant, right? Which is already a weight in and of itself. And she was just doing pull-ups, like with weight, 8 months pregnant in the newspaper. And it's like, you know, nothing would stop her, right? It's like, you know, Kikkan has this like almost like subhuman like ability to kind of push through things.
I had to relearn how to be a ski racer once I became a mom because my time was no longer just my own. I had a little baby boy that was reliant on me, and I was a bit more on his schedule than my own. So I had to get really efficient with my training time. Thankfully, I had an amazing support system so that I could go out and I could do my training.
What you doing, Rick? Are you doing sit-ups with mommy?
In the summer of 2017, I went on a 10-day training camp in Sweden, and I was really excited because I'd always enjoyed the camps over there, but I had to leave Breck for the longest period that I ever had, and when I got over there and got into the routine, I realized the feeling was totally different. While the training camp made the most sense for my performance that season, I didn't feel like it was maybe the best thing for my family. And I was really feeling that dilemma in my head and knowing I wasn't going to be able to balance that much longer. Coming into the 2018 season, I knew it would be my last shot at an Olympic Games. But my season had not been going well up to that point. To top it off, I developed a stress fracture in my foot 6 weeks before the Games. But thankfully, after arriving in Pyeongchang, I started to find my form. 36 hours before the team sprint, they still hadn't announced who would be racing on that team. But when the coach walked in, Sadie Bjornsson and I were sitting there, and he let us know that they'd chosen me to ski with Jessie Diggins. So while we hadn't specifically talked about it, we knew we had a chance to win a medal. And I was hearing that I got to race for my team one more time and potentially go for that Olympic medal.
So as the coaches sat us down that night, we knew that Jessie was going to be on the team because she had been best in the world that year and she had clearly defined her position. But who was going to be that second position was still up in the air for a decision to be made. And going into it, I felt all but 100% sure that I was going to be on the team. The coaches told me what I had to accomplish to be on the team, and I checked every single one of those things off the box. So in my mind, I knew I was there. So as they sat us down 2 nights before, I was ready for my name to roll off their tongue, but that's not actually what happened. And so, you know, when you experience the pain of not being selected for your literal dream, the thing you've been working towards for years and years, a lot of the initial reaction would be to feel anger, to feel anger towards the other person who made the team. But I knew that Kikkan, I knew this girl who had taught me everything, who had given me everything, that had showed me everything, was going to be an amazing competitor in that race, and she deserved it. She had done a lot of amazing things in her career. And so I looked to her and I said, if not me, then you, and I believe in you just as much.
The morning of the team sprint, I was so nervous. Despite the fact that I'd already done 16 Olympic races, I felt the pressure to represent my team and go out with a bang. I knew I'd be up against two of the other greatest skiers of all time, and that it was my job to keep us in the race, to tag off to Jessie and let her fight it out for the medals. When we arrived at the stadium that night, it was the most Olympic feeling race of my career. The lights were bright. Our staff had gone through every single pair of skis in our entire team's fleet to find the fastest skis that night. So I got to pull on my relay socks, we put USA on our cheek, and Jessie and I never talked about the medals. We talked about just going out, executing our plan, skiing smart, skiing strong. And so when I planted my poles in the snow and that gun went off, I was completely in the moment and ready to roll my eyes back into my head if I had to put my team in good position. And so as the laps unfolded, the pace ramped up, but I was matching my competitors stride for stride. Team sprints can be really chaotic. We're coming into the exchange zone at 20 miles an hour, but Jessie and I had practiced our tags and we nailed every single one. As we headed into the last lap, I knew that the pace was going to be furious. As we headed up the course's main climb, I had skated with everything in every ounce of my being, but I hung right with Norway and Sweden and came down into the stadium in medal contention and got to tag off to my teammate and fall in the snow with the most satisfying feeling, knowing I had done my job. A few seconds later, when I picked myself up, I saw Jessie and Norway and Sweden coming down into the stadium, and for a split second, I let myself think we might win a medal. And this emotion took over me and I just started yelling. And Charlotte Kalla from Sweden was standing next to me and she started yelling. So we had this screaming match to see who could will their teammate to the finish line faster. And when they lunged at the line, it was too close to call. So I looked at the scoreboard and I saw number 1, United States, 0.19, and realized we hadn't just won a medal, we had won the gold medal. And I was so overtaken by emotion in that moment that I ran over to Jessie, and somehow she still had enough breath to say, we just won the Olympics. And our entire team was right there. All the women that had worked side by side with us to make it happen. And it truly was the storybook ending. Coming off that Olympic medal win was so much fun. Jessie and I got to fly to New York City. We were on talk shows. We closed the stock exchange. We got front row seats to Hamilton. And then I got to go back to Europe and finish my World Cup career, and then finish my final national championship, and then come home to Anchorage and have a week-long of celebrations with a parade downtown. There were Kikkan specials at restaurants. And it was so wonderful to have that week to celebrate with my whole community and literally put a bookend on my career and move on to the next phase of my life.
The idea that, sport is, on the one hand, it's just sport, right? But on the other hand, it moved people to tears, and it was so inspiring for all of us to know that we could do this and do it the right way, compete clean, work hard, do it as a team. It was just so empowering, that feeling. And it's still so emotional for me today to think about that. And being able to hold that flag with Kikkan and know that was her last Olympics ever. And what a way for it to have gone.
Following all those celebrations in Alaska, we packed up as a family, and we'd already planned this whole move down to British Columbia to follow Jeff's career. So we arrived and we're just kind of setting up our new life, and it was Mother's Day. beautiful day in Penticton, and Jeff and Breck and I went for a hike up on this hillside, and there were all these yellow flowers everywhere, and the sun was out, it was warm, and I remember just thinking to myself, wow, life can't get any better. This is incredible. I'm so excited for this next chapter. And then getting ready for bed that night, I just happened to brush past a hard spot on my chest and immediately had a sinking feeling that something wasn't right. And the next day, I walked into the Penticton Regional Hospital and to the mammogram department and shared that I'd found something, and I got referred to a walk-in clinic. And when I saw the doctor there, he looked at me and said, well, you're young and healthy. It's probably nothing, but let's order the follow-up test just in case. And a couple weeks later, I went into the hospital for the mammogram and the ultrasound and happened to bump into a friend I just made in Penticton, a radiologist named John Wilkie. And he kind of wondered what I was doing there, but followed me in through the ultrasound. And when they saw something concerning on the report, he then helped get a biopsy going that day. And he actually watched Breck while his partner did the procedure. And then I was off to Sweden the next day to go to a friend's wedding, a World Cup competitor who had become a really good friend. And I'd almost kind of put it into the back of my mind for a bit. And I was riding in the car with my longtime friend and teammate, Liz Steven.
And we're on our way to the wedding, and her phone rings. And we're just sitting in the back seat, and she looks at it and looks at me, and I knew it was the doc, and she answers it, and I'm sitting next to one of my best friends in the world, and you just you instantly just know, what the doc is saying, and I think both our hearts kind of sank.
Kikkan had been referred to our department because of a lump she had discovered in her right breast. We performed the biopsy just prior to her heading over to Sweden for her friend's wedding. A couple days later, the results from the lab confirmed invasive breast carcinoma, so I picked up the phone and called her in Sweden to break the news that she had cancer. There was initial silence on the other end of the line. I tried to reassure her that nothing would be done immediately in the few days she was over there, and we would deal with this and formulate a plan when she got back. I also asked her if anyone was with her, and was relieved to hear that Liz was with her in the car.
And we're on our way to have this amazing time at a really good friend's wedding in Sweden, and it's like she gets this news, and I think most of us would have had a really hard time just putting it aside when you have news like that. And what Kikkan's always been amazingly good at is taking a piece of information and deciding whether it's pertinent and she can do anything about it right now or not. And this was not something she could do anything about. She wasn't gonna let it ruin her weekend, and she just puts it in a box, sits with it for a minute, and then just kind of puts it aside, knowing that in a week she'd go home and have to open it and deal with it.
After I got the diagnosis, I couldn't wait to get home, so I actually bought a brand new plane ticket so I could get home a few days earlier. And my mom was coming to visit, and that next morning when I woke up, and Breck came running out to see me and jumped in my lap. That's when it really hit me how real and scary this was gonna be. Because I didn't know what was gonna happen. But I knew with him in my lap, I was gonna do whatever it took to get through this.
When Kikkan and I met for the first time after she got her diagnosis was, I think, the lowest point that I saw her. She was absolutely in tears because she had been blindsided. This cancer just came out of nowhere, and here you have your whole life in front of you, you think, and you're given this kind of diagnosis. It's just got to be overwhelming. But really, that was the lowest point, was when she got the news. I think when she started down the treatment, it was hard, and there were tough times, but she was taking this problem and coming up with a plan and getting through it.
So in the spring, I think it was the early spring of 2019, Kikkan reached out to me and said, I have something I want to talk to you about. And I said, okay. And so we got on the phone and she said, I was just diagnosed with breast cancer. And I was just like, oh, whoa. And immediately kind of what came to mind is like how similar our situations were. We were about the same age when we were diagnosed. We both had small children. Those things like make it really tough. When you're diagnosed under the age of 40, you're considered a young survivor. And then to add this layer of having kids that you have to deal with and worry about being there for, it's really a significant bond among that group of people who have that happening to them. And so we talked, and like I remember one of her main concerns was, should I come back to Anchorage for treatment? And I said, I think you should come back to Anchorage for treatment. That was my opinion. Like this is where so much of your support network is, and the community is going to help you out. I think it's going to be really positive thing for you, and as well as for the community to see someone of that level just won a gold medal, being diagnosed with cancer and just still living their life. And that's, I think, exactly what she's done, is continue to live her life all through treatment and post-treatment.
I brought ice mitts and socks for the exit here, right? Going through chemotherapy was the hardest thing I'd ever experienced in my life, because I had no idea how it was going to feel or what was coming, and I really had no control. I just kind of had to take it as it came. And in those first day or two, you feel okay, and then all of a sudden things kick in and you just feel sick. And you feel the metallic taste in your mouth, and your stomach feels turned upside down. And the energy I'd always relied on just dropped. And I still had a 2-year-old at home. So I did my best to try to find ways to give myself that energy where I could. And thankfully there weren't too many days, but this one point in the second round, I caught a cold, and that knocked me down super hard. And I remember there was a day when Brett came up to me and he wanted to play, and he could tell that I could barely keep my eyes open, and he just laid on my chest. And I think instinctively he could understand what I was going through, but at the same time he was my best motivation, my best distraction, because as sick as I was feeling, I still wanted to be a mom. And I had an incredible support team, because I was used to being Kikkan the invincible athlete, and I wasn't invincible. And my team was there to lift me up, to remind me it was going to be okay, and to get me through one day at a time. And I was so grateful for that support, that team around me. I'd always known team was important, but until you go through your lowest lows, that's when you see how important team is. And so physically I was knocked down, and mentally too, just not knowing what was going to happen. It just really had to take it day by day.
I watched my daughter go through the cancer treatments, and I wasn't there for every minute. Cancer, you have chemotherapy, and it's repeated treatment, and every time you have more of an effect, and you start to see it in the face, and you start to see it in maybe the step is not quite as lively. And it is very hard for somebody who's been so vibrant and so on top of things and racing at a world-class level to see this same person struggling with just basic things like getting up out of bed and picking up your child. And it definitely is hard on her. Those 6 chemo treatments, they compounded each other every time, and there was less of that strong, vibrant athlete every time. But still, there was this hope shining through. Even when she had to shave off all the hair on her head, she used that as a positive moment.
How you doing, Keegan?
Good. I'm going to be staring at this thing for a little bit every day.
Yeah. Well, I see they have some. Wow, look at this.
I know, it's pretty comfortable so far.
So I think it's important for everyone to understand how difficult this course of treatment was, even for someone who is as strong physically, mentally, and emotionally as Kikkan is. The course of her chemotherapy, she received 4 different types of chemotherapy over a period of about 18 weeks. And then she had a break for surgery, and then she had a bit of a break. And then she underwent radiation therapy with myself, which is Monday through Friday for 6.5 weeks. So all told, this is a very long, difficult course of treatment. But I think anyone who knows Kikkan can speak to her indomitable spirit. And even when I was taking care of her during the latter part of her treatment course, I think just knowing her and how positive she is, she really just kind of exudes this sense of confidence, and I'm going to beat this, I'm going to get to the end, I'm going to do everything I can to reach my goals, to reach my objectives.
So where's the other spot gotta go?
The other spot is upstairs.
Getting the good word after my lumpectomy that we had gotten clear margins was incredible news. That's when I kind of turned the corner and started thinking more about, okay, I think I can get through this. And with cancer, it's the type of thing where, there's never anything for sure. But at that point, I knew that I just had to be hopeful, and that was the best news that we could hang on to. And so from there, I really just tried to look forward and feel like I was getting back on track and continuing to do everything I could in my power to contribute to that good prognosis. But it really, looking at Breck, looking at my family, it just made me feel optimistic that there was a future there and that I was going to get through this and switch from being a cancer fighter to a cancer survivor. Coming off my cancer treatment, it was really exciting to get back on track and get into some opportunities that were coming off my career as an Olympic medalist, some new opportunities to interact with the cancer community, and to start developing my new career. But many of those opportunities meant being on the road. And after a pretty extensive travel schedule for a few months, I realized what I really wanted was to be home with my family. So I started making moves to be at home more often. And then the pandemic hit, and finally found myself with some time at home. And it was a blessing in disguise at first because I got to just be in one place and spend time with my family. But then kind of out of nowhere, my marriage ended abruptly through no choice of my own. And I found myself navigating the pandemic on my own as a single mom. I felt like in such a state of flux. My ski career had ended, my marriage had just ended, I had come through a cancer experience, and really, since I stepped off the podium in 2018, I hadn't even had a chance to catch my breath. For the first time in my life, I had no clear idea of where I was going. And then this opportunity came along to become the executive director of the organization in Anchorage where my career actually started. And I got an opportunity to get out in the ski community and participate in events that I had never been able to do as a World Cup racer, and give back to the community that had done so much for me as an athlete. But most importantly, it was time to focus on Breck. Coming back to Anchorage meant I could see him grow and explore his passions on the same slopes where my story started. And I was just so excited to dedicate my attention and really let our next chapter begin together.